We'd like to go ahead and begin an important part of the life of the college and of the future of MacMurray Foundation and the future of Jacksonville, quite honestly. Hopefully you picked up the program because there's several thanks in there that we need to recognize. Earlier I talked about needing a letter of support from the property owner, and we are thankful to Otto Roman, who actually purchased the Percy LaVon Julian Hall, Henry Pfeiffer Library, Rutledge Lawn, and the soccer field is all of his property now. And he bought those coming from New York, lived upstate New York. The story is that Otto had the name MacMurray in his family's past, saw online the buildings were for sale, came to Jacksonville, fell in love with it, and purchased the buildings. So he is now the owner of the buildings. He is committed to remaining the property, the lawn, which separates Annie Murner and Henry Pfeiffer, as it was originally identified and was structured, that there should never be anything built between the two buildings in recognition of the marriage of Henry and Annie Murner. He's honoring that and will not build anything between, even though that covenant no longer exists with the college's closing. So with a special thanks to Otto, who's been working most of the day to beautify the area around the memorial. We also want to thank Sharon Mather. Sharon's been sort of the go-to person here in Jacksonville that picked up the actual plaque itself, which weighs well over a couple 100 pounds, so it's not easy, but between Sharon and her husband and son, arranged for the installation and has it erected appropriately as it should be. And we want to recognize the Illinois State Historical Society and the local Jacksonville Bound to Stay Bounds bookbindery. Between MacMurray Foundation, the Illinois State Historical Society, and Bound to Stay Bounds, the three partnered together to cover the costs of the marker and the setting of it up. So all should be recognized. We're also sad to say today that Dr. Colleen Hester was due to be here today. Dr. Hester, as many may know, was the first female college of the president, as president, even though the college itself was all women's for over 100 years. But sadly, Colleen fell and had an injury several days ago and is unable to join us. So our thoughts were with her, and we will so share them with her. I'd like to introduce, to begin with, Bill Fury, who is the Executive Director of the Illinois State Historical Society. The Society oversees historical markers throughout the state of Illinois, and I believe even this week had several other installations in the state of Illinois, different areas. So anything that goes up as historical marker goes to the Illinois State Historical Society in Springfield. So they do other programs as well, and I encourage you to go to their website to learn more about them. Bill has been the key contact for us in arranging for the production of the marker, giving items, information on its installation and directions. And at this point, we'd like to have a few words from Bill Fury, Executive Director, Illinois State Historical Society, and a member of MacMurray class of 1975.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me to speak on behalf of the State Historical Society here today. But I'm going to do something a little unprecedented, perhaps, but maybe not. This is a very sacred space to a lot of us. So I would like to take a moment to mention the names, any name that you'd like to lift up who went to MacMurray, who's passed. And I'll start with two names that you all know, Rand Burnett and Michael Fisher. Anybody? Raise their names. Go ahead. The Freibergs. Phyllis Lang and? Yes. Alan Metcalf. Dick McGuire. Wow. Richard Palmer. We all know names. Michael Belos, basketball master and history professor. This place needs to hear those names, and so do we. You are the keepers of the memory. And as a member of the Illinois State Historical Society, that's what I try to do with the State Historical Society, to remember things that we've lost. I was telling Alan just a couple minutes ago that this is the third college that I know of that has a historical marker to it because it's gone. The first is Shirtlift College in Alton, the very first college in Illinois founded by the Methodists. John Mason Peck founded that college. A lot of the early ministers in Illinois went through Shirtlift College. Shimer College, the place where they taught the Great Books curriculum for many, many years, up in Mount Carroll. All that's left is an historical marker. But we've got this wonderful campus still intact, and this marker out here will tell people for generations, we hope, that this place existed, that the names that we mentioned, these people existed, that we were here to tell the story, and we're here to keep telling the story of MacMurray College. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.
I said a few things about Alan earlier, so I won't say anything else other than that Alan also gave the keynote address a year ago when there was the formal closing of the college ceremony here. If you'd like to see that ceremony as a whole or in tidbits, it is on our YouTube channel. So you can go to YouTube and in the search put MacMurray Foundation, and all the YouTubes are on there. One of those is Alan's speech as well as other parts of that ceremony. So I encourage you to check out YouTube, as well as we'll have other things on a continual basis. Alan?
Thanks, Dave. Okay, in the next few minutes, and I mean few minutes, what we're going to do is take a quick tour of the campus, even though we're inside and not outside, and I can't, But bear with me, and let's see what happens. Actually, I'm going to start not on the campus, but I'm going to start over here to the right and a little bit behind me at Centenary Church. Now, the church in 1846 that a group of Methodist preachers, including Peter Cartwright and Peter Akers, attended and congregated and created the first iteration of MacMurray College called Illinois Conference Female Academy. That no longer exists, that church, but its successor does. And if you keep going on State Street, you'll come across what became known as the President's House. It started out belonging to a fellow named James Jaquess, who was the first president of the college, and he lived there for a while. He was a good friend of Lincoln's. He was actually sort of an agent and a spy for Lincoln. You've heard about George Washington slept here. Well, actually, Lincoln slept here, too, over at that house. It didn't come into the possession of the college, however, until about 100 years ago, in the middle of the 1920s. If we continue on our little tour around the periphery of the former college, behind us on State Street, of course, was Main Hall, right? All of you remember Main Hall. What you may not remember is that there were 3 versions of Main Hall. The first 2, unfortunately, kind of burned down, which is not great. The third one, however, lasted for a long time. It was built in 1873, and only in 1976, finally, had it reached kind of the end of the line, and it was raised. Dave had mentioned earlier, there's a plaque over in the corner of Clay and State Street that recognizes the 3 main halls. And it's a brand new plaque that Bill was instrumental in having made and erected. And if you haven't had a chance yet, please go over and see it. You'll also see the cornerstone for the second main hall over there as well. Attached to Main, of course, was Harker over here, and the Fine Arts Building over here, and all of those were taken down in the 1970s. If you continue on the periphery of the campus, there was also something called Hartner Gymnasium, which was the gym for women, and it was also an auditorium. And, yeah, all right. Unfortunately, in 1929, there was a fire there during a George Washington birthday celebration. 3 women lost their lives in that fire, and others were injured. But Hartner is no longer with us either. But if you continue down, heading south, of course, there's the Student Center, in the 1960s. There's the Education Complex and the Athletic Facility in the 1970s, all the way down to the South Campus. And all of those residence halls, all 4 of them, were built in the 1950s and the 1960s. If you continue on the other side, of course, there is the chemistry building, Julian Hall, and of course, nearby in an earlier time were the stables. I wasn't around for the stables, but I've heard a lot about them. And the final building on the periphery is right behind us to the right, which was the Putnam Springer Center for Music and the Arts, which was built in the early years of the 21st century. Those are the buildings on the periphery, but the heart of the campus, really, are the 7 buildings, mostly Georgian-style buildings, that were erected over a course of 21 years, from 1928 to 1949. The first of these, of course, over to the right, was MacMurray Hall, or MacMurray Science Hall, as it was known. It was dedicated in 1928, and the very famous Chicago social worker and reformer and founder of Hull House, Jane Addams, was there for the dedication of that building in 1928. It was followed by Jane Hall, over here, and the dining hall, McClellan Dining Hall, in 1930. Now, Jane Hall was named after James Edwin MacMurray's second wife, whose name was Jane, right? Makes sense. MacMurray was married 3 times. He was widowed twice. Catherine Hall, over in this direction, was named for his 3rd wife, who survived him and later became the chair of the Board of Trustees of the college. After MacMurray himself died in 1943, she served for another 20 years until the mid-60s. Then, of course, there's Anne Rutledge. Now, this is an interesting story. MacMurray, of course, was the one who really put up the money for most of the buildings during this period. And he had this wonderful partnership with the president of the college, whose name was Clarence McClellan, and they were really good buddies. And MacMurray was a Chicago businessman. He was a philanthropist. For a brief period of time, he served in the Illinois General Assembly. When it came to Anne Rutledge Hall, there was a discussion about the name, and nobody was quite sure what to do. He's giving me a warning here. I'm almost done. What to call it. One idea was Edwin, because MacMurray was known by his middle name, Edwin. If you had that, you would have Edwin and you would have Jane, right? Makes sense? That didn't work. So somebody came up with the idea of Rutledge, and so they called MacMurray to see what he felt about that. And he said, "Oh, okay, I guess I'm okay with it. I never thought much of Anne, but I know Lincoln kind of liked her, and he actually knew her better than I did, so it's okay." So it became Anne Rutledge Hall. And then, of course, you know the story of Pfeiffer Library and Annie Murner Chapel. A lot of things happened on this campus. A lot of commencements took place here. One was in 1963. Vice President Johnson was here just a few months before he became president. He talked about there must be no compromise with enemies abroad or the destructive elements of hate and suspicion at home. Then there was another commencement address, and I'll close with this. In 1947, the former First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, spoke before a crowd estimated to be about 5,000 people to that group of graduates in 1947. She was talking very much to the graduates of that year, but it could have been actually graduates of MacMurray of almost any year. She said, "The purpose of life is to live it, to taste experience to the utmost, to reach out eagerly without fear for newer and richer experiences." That preparation for life is what MacMurray provided over its 174 years. Hail to MacMurray.
Thank you, Alan. We all learned a bit more of the history of the college, the sad closing of the college. At this point, we're honored and privileged. As we all know, the class of 2020 was the last graduating class. And we're honored to have a member of that class, Alexis Moore, with us today. What we would like to do is, with the bagpiper, follow Alexis and the bagpiper across the street, where we will formally unveil for everyone to see for the first time the marker, and we will ask Alexis to be the first to read the marker.
Yeah, no problem.
MacMurray College was founded as Illinois Conference Female Academy in 1846 by Methodist preachers. It became Illinois Women's College in 1899 before acquiring its final name in 1930. MacMurray College was a major presence in Jacksonville for 174 years until its closing in 2020. A principal founder, Peter Cartwright, and its first president, James Jaquist, were both Lincoln acquaintances. During its early years, it became a leading center for women's education in the Midwest and one of a handful of colleges that served women exclusively. For many years, the college's only building was Main Hall, located on East State Street. Fires destroyed the original building twice. Its final incarnation was erected in 1873 and raised in 1976. The Georgian-style buildings that graced the campus were constructed in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s during the presidency of Clarence P. McClellan, and through the generosity of the Chicago businessman James E. MacMurray, after whom the college was named. The first class of men was admitted in 1957. MacMurray was known throughout its existence for its strong liberal arts curriculum. The MacMurray Plan of the 1960s was nationally recognized. Generations of women and men were educated here. Among those who visited and spoke on this campus were the social worker and reformer Jane Addams, former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, and Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson.
Just so you know, marker will be facing the other way, but we didn't want people to be on the streets today. Also want to acknowledge and thank Otto Roman has joined us. Otto's the current owner of the property.
Thank you.
Otto's been working all day to make a more beautiful setting, so that's not just things. Thank you, Otto. We appreciate you. You're part of that.
Hail to MacMurray, we pledge our loyalty. Knowledge, faith, and service shall our answer ever be. One more verse. Wisdom gained through college illuminates the way. How to meet with reverence the duties of each day. Thus our code is molded to lead a loyal clan. Wisdom, duty, reverence shall all be our goal and plan. David Murray!